Cue the music. Hey guys, so as you may have guessed from the thumbnail and the title of this video, we're going to be talking about the Dibbuk Box. Yes, specifically the one that is currently in Zach Bagans' Not Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada, and was made famous by this book by Jason Haxton and the movie The Possession. So we're going to get into that a little bit. I'm not going to give you the entire backstory of it because it's way too long, and it's already out there. I mean, there's different versions, but the main story is out there already, and you can look it up. I know that there's a Jason Haxton has a website based on it where you can actually see the original eBay post, or at least the second one, because the original I think is gone. But you can see the original story. What I'm going to do in this video is point out a few key issues that I have with the box and the story, specifically the story about the box and its origins and stuff like that, and show you, hopefully by the end of the video, you'll understand that this is indeed a hoax. So let's just jump in. I'm going to give you a timeline, and this is like the Cliff Notes timeline. So in 2001, September of that year, Kevin Mannis, the first guy that wrote about it, allegedly went to an estate sale, and he probably did. He probably went to this estate sale where he purchased the Dibbuk Box. And at the time, it was called a wine cabinet. And in different versions, like in the original version of the story, he didn't know what a Dibbuk was. Like, that's the impression that you get. But a granddaughter, so one of the ladies that lived at the house where the estate sale was, the granddaughter mentioned that it's a Dibbuk Box. And Kevin, questions it, and he makes it seem like he doesn't know what it is. But in later versions of the story, when he gives interviews, he does know what it is. So that's kind of your first clue. So just jump ahead 2 years. 2003, June of that year, Kevin Mannis puts up an eBay auction, and he writes this full story about how it was a Holocaust victim that had acquired the box in Spain after this Holocaust woman, her name was Havela, yeah, that's right, that she escaped a concentration camp after the Germans came into Poland and took her prisoner. But she escaped the concentration camp after her entire family was killed, made it to Spain, picked up this box, and somehow it became a Dibbuk Box. We don't know how, but the rest of the story is out there. Like I said, you can look it up. So Kevin Mannis finally put it up on eBay after, he tried to give the box away as a gift, but allegedly, according to the story, nobody wanted it. So he put it up on eBay and sold it for, I believe, $140 to a college student in Missouri, I think. So jump ahead, 2004, the same college student decides that, freaky stuff is going on. Even though the college student puts an online journal up documenting his adventures, I guess, or experiences, because he knew the box was haunted, even though he gives today something bad happened here, but he gives alternative explanations, logical ones, stress or allergies or stuff like that. So no big deal. But he puts it up for sale again. This college student, he puts it up for sale on eBay, and it sells for $280 to Jason Haxton, which is he's the author of this book. He's also a museum curator for a college, and he's the one that really makes this box famous. He writes this book about his alleged adventures, and the book comes out. Then a film called The Possession is based on the book, and that is released in 2012. All right, there's a few issues I have with the book. Overall, I feel that the book just expands on the legend of the Dibbuk Box, and that it primarily, Jason Haxton goes back and contacts Kevin Mannis, and they get together, and there's more of the story that comes from Kevin, and it just seems like this story evolves. It doesn't actually get researched, but it just evolves. And according to Kevin Mannis, he went back to the estate where he purchased the Dibbuk Box, and he talked to a old woman named Sophie, who was the cousin of Havela. Havela is the one that originally, I guess, created the Dibbuk Box, or is said to have created the Dibbuk Box. And Sophie gives this story how on November 9th, 1938, they held a seance. So there was a group of women, Jewish women, that got together. Sophie, Havela, a couple other friends. They got together and they held seances routinely, I guess, according to the story, which is odd. On this date in 1938, they allegedly held a seance where they were going to bring the spirits into the world. The spirits that they were talking to, these spirits wanted to come into the world. They wanted to come in permanently and just remain among the living. The group of women thought this was a bad idea, but they decided to trap the spirits in the box. So on the night, November 9th, when this was supposed to happen, shit didn't go right. And it just went bad, and apparently the spirits were released into the world. And as Kevin puts it, and this is a quote, "What followed was a time of sorrow and tragedy for all Jews in Europe." That's on page 100. Now remember, this was in 1938, and then World War II started in 1939 and lasted until 1945. So, according to this quote, it sounds like Kevin is incorporating and almost exploiting the whole World War II and Holocaust thing for his own story. That's how I see it, because he's kind of saying that the release of these spirits that weren't trapped in the Dibbuk Box were the cause of all the Holocaust. That's what he's saying. So yeah, I have a problem with that. The second problem is that when you're reading this on the same page, and I think it's page 100 in this book, when they're talking about the seances and the spirits getting loose, there's another quote from Kevin where he says, "The original Dibbuk Box was most likely destroyed during the war." And according to Sophie, the old woman that he's talking to, the Dibbuk Box that they now had was created in Portland, Oregon. That's convenient because that's where Kevin Mannis lived. Anyway, the purpose was to regather and hold the same spirit or spirits that had been released on that fateful night in November, 73 years ago or whatever, when this conversation was taking place. So, I mean, this brings up its own issues because, one, it's saying that the Dibbuk Box that you've seen on television, like in the Haunted Museum, not Haunted Museum, and other places on these TV specials, is not the original box, even though they claim it is. The second point with that is that while you're reading this book, the story in this book, Sophie's saying that, this other box that was created for a purpose, to trap the spirits, but she doesn't actually say if that happened or not. There's no closure to that story. She doesn't actually come out and say, yes, we've successfully trapped the spirits in the box, and that's why it was never to be opened, and it was locked shut, and on all this. There is no resolution to that story. So it's a big plot hole. Big, huge plot hole. One other point I want to bring up before I move ahead is that this story about Sophie and Havela creating the original box in 1939, because that's the date that was given, is really important because it solidifies why this box, or the one that looks almost exactly like this that's in Zach Bagans' museum, could not be the Dibbuk Box, because this box was not created yet. And what I mean by that is that this is not a wine cabinet, first and foremost. It's a liquor cabinet. It's a mini bar. That's exactly what it is. And it was invented about 20 years after this seance that allegedly happened in 1938. And I have the original patent right here, and I'll put it up on screen so you can see it a little bit better. And the original application was filed September 18th, 1957. And it was granted a patent on May 27th, 1958. So that's a big deal. I mean, we're talking 1938 when the seance happened, and then 1958 when the patent was actually granted. And yeah, I mean, this is the construction. That's the actual box showing the mechanism underneath. And I mean, it's 20 years, 20 freaking years later. So definitely it could not have happened. And to make it even further, I mean, to go further with this, because it's not just 20 years later, it's a little bit more. Because this model, this version that I purchased online, complete with all of the glassware, like the original glassware, you can see it actually says vodka on it, and there's bourbon and stuff, and all the glassware that came with it. This is an early version because of the workmanship on the back. You can't really see it, but there's curved edges here, and this is a higher quality construction that happened during the preliminary, the original manufacturing process. I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart. The Dibbuk box that's on display in the museum looks to be a later construction, and that happens when items like this become mass produced and you use cheaper material and or cheaper processes in order to get them out faster. Mass production, so that you can get more out in a quicker time. And you can see on the back of the original one has actual nails. It's got straight edges and then like a panel on the back that's nailed to to secure it in place, which is a cheaper construction, and that puts it at a later date, sometime in the 60s. So it's over 20 years after the seance that this box was actually invented. So it could not have been used to trap a Dibbuk. It wasn't anyway, but moving on. All right, so we jump ahead a couple years now to 2016, and there's an episode of one of Zach Bagans' spin-off shows where he gets items, and we see Jason Haxton, who is the author of this book, appear on the show, and he donates the Dibbuk box that he has to the museum. And it's interesting. This is really interesting because in this book on page 166, Haxton writes, and I quote, "I do not want to be the one to set the original Dibbuk box off on another journey. I believe it has served its purpose and shouldn't be disturbed." So I guess that didn't really last that long, did it? I wonder why he donated it. I mean, I can only speculate. There's no concrete or written agreements or anything like that, but I can speculate, why he probably donated it. But that's just my opinion. So jump ahead a couple years to 2019, and I find myself in Las Vegas, Nevada, because I was hosting a workshop for SciCon, which is a science convention put on by the fine folks at Skeptical Inquirer magazine. So I'm there, and one of the things I wanted to do was visit the Not Haunted Museum by Mr. Baggins. So my wife and I go out, we take friends of ours, Susan Gerbic and Mark Edward, and we visit the museum. And good thing we did, because this was the last time I was allowed in. According to people that used to work there, I am officially banned from the museum, so I'm not allowed in there anymore. I don't know why. I guess he doesn't like my writings. Anyway, so it piqued my interest. I went in, I saw the Dibbuk box that they have there, and I was unimpressed. It was very small, much smaller than I expected, and I mean, I didn't realize how small it was until I saw it there, and then when I got my own here, but it piqued my interest still because of the claims that they were making in the museum. The tour guide was telling us all kinds of crap that was going on, so I wanted to look into it more. So I started writing an article for Skeptical Inquirer, and this is when I discovered something interesting. So on October 24th of 2015, this is a full year before the Dibbuk box was donated to the museum, Kevin Manis posted to a Facebook page called Haunt Me. And Haunt Me is actually it's a ghost hunting show that is not on network television. It's on Amazon Prime and I think YouTube. So it's on there. You can find the videos online if you go to their Facebook page or website. So in this comment that Kevin Manis posted, he criticizes the crew for an episode that they filmed which featured an alleged Dibbuk box. It didn't look like this. It looked different. So Kevin kind of went off on them. And here's what he wrote. "I have to call bullshit on the episode Haunt Me did at Mexico High School with a supposed Dibbuk box. The setup and definition of a Dibbuk box was entirely false and erroneous, and the claim that the box being used has a so-called fifth-level demon was also a bunch of hogwash. Now, I have to agree, up to this point at least, I have to agree with Kevin that, because I watched the episode, I found it online, and I watched through the entire thing. And yeah, the box that they had it looked more like one of these things, with some bands on the top. You can look it up and watch the episode if you want. But it had a chain around it, and I found it interesting because the owner of that box, the guy that presented it, his name is Corey Heisen, and I think I'm saying that right. But he's the same guy that now owns the Conjuring House, which I just found interesting. I don't know if there's a connection yet, but yeah, I found it interesting. During the episode, Corey explains what he believes a Dibbuk box is, and I'm going to play the clip here under fair use, because we're going to critique it afterwards.
There it is. Oh, well, this isn't creepy or anything. It's set up in the middle of the room. It's in the middle, boy.
A Dibbuk box was used to capture negative energy, demons, just stuff that people didn't want around. They would trap these things in these boxes, seal them up, wax, change whatnot, and basically just put it away, and try to forget about it. And as long as nobody opens the box, everything seemed fine. I happen to be able to find one through different people.
All right, so that's not correct. That's not correct at all. And first, I'm going to read the definition of a Dibbuk from my Standard Jewish Encyclopedia from 1966. So, Dibbuk. In Kabbalistic folklore, I hope I said it right. I'm not good at pronouncing these names. The soul of a sinner which, after his death, transmigrates into the body of a living person. Not a box. The Dibbuk can be expelled by conjuring the divine name, and such exorcism was practiced in the circle of Isaac Luria, and later by wonder workers and Hasidic. Oh, this is a hard word. I'm not going to try that. I'm going to put this up on screen. A famous play was written on the subject by S. Ansky. Incidentally, that play was turned into a movie called The Dibbuk, and it was awesome. I watched it twice, and it really shows you what a Dibbuk is. The second issue that I have with this is that trapping a Dibbuk in a box, has never been part of the folklore. It just hasn't. At least not until Kevin Manis posted his eBay auction. That's when it started the legend there. And although Corey doesn't say it outright, he makes it seem like acquiring one of these boxes is not easy. After the release of Haxton's book, Jason Haxton's book, this one, the popularity of the Dibbuk boxes in general, skyrocketed. People just wanted them. And, they wanted to know the story. They wanted to know if they could get one themselves. This creepy, get a creepy object like that's supposed to be haunted because it's got old, weird stuff inside of it. So, a quick search on eBay, and you can see it here. A quick search reveals that there's hundreds of listings. You can get them on eBay and Etsy and anywhere. And in fact, I have a few here too, covered in wax, because that's standard procedure, which is now all crumbling off now. But I don't know where the wax thing came from, but apparently maybe that's like eBay, Etsy exclusive, because the Dibbuk boxes that are now sold, they're almost always just old jewelry boxes that are locked up. They always come with a padlock, and they're covered in candle wax, which just makes it frickin' messy. I don't know why people do that. In short, it's just a way for people to capitalize on this legend, and people are making money. They're charging like $50 or $100 or even more for junk. And the problem is, none of these boxes are real. None of them. Not even the original. And I'll show you. I'll tell you why. So, ironically, in the second part of the comment that Kevin Manis posted on the Haunt Me page, he actually comes out and he solidifies the fact that this is a legend, that this is a hoax that he created. And here's the quote: "I am uniquely qualified to make these claims as I am the original creator of the story of the Dibbuk box, which appeared as one of my eBay posts back in 2003. The idea that Dibbuk boxes have some kind of history prior to my story, and the idea that a Dibbuk box could contain anything other than a Dibbuk, along with any deviation of the type of context content that I created to be found inside of a Dibbuk box is laughable at best. And there you have it. The guy that originally started the legend just admitted that it's a hoax. I mean, that's money in the bank. Well, at least it was for him a little bit. But I mean, that's it. That's the smoking gun. That's all you really need. It's a hoax. Finally, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into this. Instead of just me sitting here talking to you and presenting pretty solid evidence, I think, I wanted to reach out to somebody that was more knowledgeable in this. So I was able to contact Rabbi Sid, and I mean, Rabbi Sid is a really nice guy. He was a rabbi for a congregation for 30 years, and he's also a doctor of education, and he's got a lot more credentials. And he's going to actually tell you, because I interviewed him about this topic, and he allowed me to record the interview so I could play it for this video. So here you go. All right, Rabbi Sid is with me, and he's going to give us a little background on what we're talking about. But first, I would like to ask you, can you explain your background, who you are, what you do, and maybe some education?
Sure. I was a rabbi for 30 years in a congregation, and I'm also a doctor of education, and most recently have taught at Grand Canyon University in their education department. I was also very much involved in a paranormal program on podcast, on video, called PKA, Paranormal Kool-Aid. And the issue of the Dibbuk box is one that I have done some work on.
Okay.
And so I'm very familiar with the subject.
Awesome. So can you explain what is a Dibbuk?
Okay. And I'm glad you asked that question, because the idea of a Dibbuk box is a new one.
Okay.
The idea of a Dibbuk is an old Jewish folklore going back to Eastern Europe. A Dibbuk is basically a vengeful spirit. It's not a demon. It is the spirit of someone who's lived. Mm-hmm. The classical Dibbuk story, which was turned into a Yiddish play and was very popular early in the 20th century, is the story of a young scholar who is very poor, who heaven has decreed will marry the daughter of a rich man. The rich man goes against heaven's decree and marries her off to another rich man's son. The young scholar commits suicide and takes over the bride's body as a Dibbuk, as a vengeful spirit.
Okay.
There is, as is the case in Judaism, there is a trial. The Dibbuk loses and has to leave the body and move on.
Okay.
So that's the classical story of the Dibbuk.
I have seen that. Because when I did research for my article, that came up, and it was available on YouTube. So I made my wife sit and watch it with me, which was it was interesting. It was really interesting to me. So, okay, so that's the classic version, you said. Now, how does that relate, or when did this Dibbuk box, to your knowledge, come into existence?
There is only, as far as I know, one Dibbuk box that used to be a wine holder. I do not know when or who started this whole thing. Okay. The only thing I can tell you is that it is very recent. We're talking 90s, 2000s. Okay. All of a sudden you have a Dibbuk box, and then all of a sudden you have all of these other Dibbuk boxes.
Right.
And I think one of the most telling things was that one of the TV shows, I'll mention it, Ghost Adventures,
right,
had the quote-unquote Dibbuk box on and had an Orthodox rabbi on. and he had no idea what the host was talking about. It went south really quickly
Yes.
because the rabbi had absolutely no idea of what a Dibbuk box was.
Right.
Because it's not part of our tradition, really.
Okay.
There is the one Dibbuk box that has a number of items in it, most of which are not really things that you would think would have any sort of supernatural attachment to it,
Right.
except for the hair.
Okay.
Supposedly there was some hair in it of a Holocaust victim, and that could have negative associations spiritually.
Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So I guess the concept then of a Dibbuk being in a box, or I sound silly. I feel silly saying that, but being in a box or trapped in a box or being held inside of a box, that's a modern concept. That's not something that's part of the folklore, correct?
No, it's not part of the folklore at all.
Okay.
It is a modern concept. It started with that one Dibbuk box. And now I've been asked several times about other boxes. I even had someone who asked me that there was a box and they were afraid it was a Dibbuk box that had a big cross on the front.
Wow.
And I'm like, it may be a Dibbuk, but it's not a Jewish one.
So when I looked into this, I really got into it. And the guy that created this story, his name was Kevin Manis, and he had an eBay auction in 2003 where he created this story about getting this Dibbuk box from an estate sale, and it came from a woman that escaped the Holocaust. She was a prisoner. Her entire family was killed, and that this woman picked up this box in Spain and brought it back to the U.S. And the family claimed that this was a Dibbuk box and it was never to be opened. And that was the story that originally appeared. Now, Kevin Manis, eventually I did find that he admitted that he created the story. He was actually, I think there was a TV show that featured one, and one of these other eBay version of Dibbuk boxes that had like candle wax all over it, made up to really look like something from a horror movie. And I think Mr. Manis was very upset about this, that other people were making money off of his idea, and he actually posted something on social media admitting that he created this entire story. For me personally, when I looked into it, and I don't know if, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this back here is one of the same boxes, and I find out that it was actually made. They were made in New York as mini bars. They were made by a company in 1957 called Karoff, and I have the actual patent application for it, and I was able to find one on eBay of all places. So for me, it's the entire idea of a Dibbuk box is a hoax that was created by one person, and then over time, other people bought it. Like there was another guy, Jason Haxton, that purchased the box and then wrote a book about it, and then there was a movie from it, and then eventually it went to this museum with Zach Baggins on that TV show, Ghost Adventures, and he sensationalized it. What do you think, I guess personally, about this? I guess the way I want to say it is, how do you feel about this part of Jewish folklore being taken and completely revamped and thrown out there as a popular, I guess, paranormal legend now?
Well, if somebody's having a problem with a Dibbuk box, and they really believe in it, The power of belief is very strong.
I agree.
If they really believe that the negative things in their lives are happening because of this thing, which has no real relation to Judaism at all, not even to Jewish folklore, then the answer is to bury it. Just bury it in a Jewish cemetery somewhere and be done with it.
Okay.
At this point, we're not even sure which is the original box because somebody made a bunch of them.
Yeah, that was Jason Haxton, who wrote a book. He had copies made. He actually hired some Amish craftsmen, which is another thing that bothered me, since the story goes that you can't open the box because that would release whatever's in there. And I have pictures, and part of them appeared in my article, of all the box, the original box, and the duplicates open on work tables, where these Amish workers had no idea what it was. So if this was true, then that potentially would put those Amish guys at risk, correct?
Yes, if this were true, it certainly would have put them at risk.
Okay.
But I agree with you. I've seen the inside of the Dibbuk box. I've seen what's in there. There's like a candle holder.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fairly common candle holder. You could buy it really in any synagogue gift shop. There's nothing particularly unusual about it. The only unusual thing was the lock of hair.
Yeah.
And if anything, I'm not particularly against ghosts and believing in that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If there was anything that was really going to hold an attachment, it would be the hair.
Okay.
Because there was nothing else in the box that was unique.
Fair enough. Okay. I guess then, any advice just to wrap this up? I mean, that's pretty much everything I was looking for. But any advice for people that believe that the Dibbuk box, especially the one that's been popularized, and the ones that are now available on eBay for anywhere from like $40 to $150, do you have any advice for people that are thinking that maybe they'll buy one, or that are still afraid of them?
Yeah, don't waste your money. They are not real. Jewish folklore does not have Dibbuks living in boxes like genies in bottles. And it is the idea of a Dibbuk, even in Jewish folklore, it's very, very, very rare.
Okay.
And you don't see rabbis in general coming across a Dibbuk anytime during their careers.
Wow. Okay.
It's we don't have, we're not like the Catholic Church. We don't have exorcisms all the time. We don't get into any of that sort of thing.
Okay. Great. Well, I appreciate your time and thank you so much. All right. So in conclusion, the bottom line is the original story of the Dibbuk box is absolutely, without a doubt, a hoax. And it was perpetrated by Kevin Manis. It grew via assumptions and biases through successive owners, the college student and his online diary, Jason Haxton and his book here. And then it was sensationalized when it got turned into a movie, and Hollywood took care of it, getting that story out there, kind of like The Conjuring House. It just blew it out of proportion and took, license or creative licensing and just made it more spooky and scary. And then, of course, Mr. Baggins gets a hold of it and just makes up more shit about it. So it's out there. It's out there. And I also want to touch on the I guess, profitable business that it spurred or created, because eBay and Etsy, you can find boxes like these. So there's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are boxes, and like I said in the beginning, I mean, they're all covered in frickin' wax. They got stuff all over them. This one's like done up with Jewish symbols, and even some writing on here. I'm not sure what that says, but I mean, these are being sold and people are buying them, and it's kind of ridiculous that this legend has spawned this. I mean, it's I guess, if you're into weird things, obviously I am, but you can't treat these things as real because they're not, and that's the point of this. It's a hoax, so there's nothing scary about it. When you see TV shows about this, and I mean, incidentally, the one TV show Haunt Me that Corey was on with his Dibbuk box, so that same box was used on a different TV show and presented by the Newkirks, who have like this traveling museum, and they brought a Dibbuk box with them and claimed that it does all this kind of stuff. And it's funny when you compare, because I actually compared images on the TV show of both boxes and found the same scratches, the same unique scratches on the top of the box for both of them. So that's how I figured out it was the same box. But I mean, stuff like that is being presented as, hey, this is real and you should be scared of this, and it creates all kinds of havoc and, weird shit happens. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I think what you're doing is you're exploiting Jewish folklore, Jewish mythology, and you're making something out of nothing. And I think it's not right. But, that's me. I don't know. That's me. I don't think it's right. But, like I said, hopefully in the end you realize that this is a hoax and it's not something to be taken seriously, and that we can, move on to something else. So, anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, give me a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you want to see more of this, please subscribe, because I also do a live Q&A show every Friday night from 9 p.m. Eastern to 11. It's called the Skeptical Help Bar. And then, what else do I do? Oh, Saturday nights, I also do 3 Tortured Souls podcast, which is on a different YouTube channel, 3 Tortured Souls. Check them out. And that's it. Remember, never stop learning.